Olá, bom dia. Carl Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal live stream. And well, big welcome to you if you're watching this on YouTube, as some people do prefer to consume the service later in the day or even on the podcast. It'd be great to hear from a few of you guys who listen via the podcast, which is most readily available from Spotify. I think is the most convenient and easy way to receive the Good Morning Portugal podcast. Anyway, a bit of a mixed bag for you this morning. I'm quite confused at the moment, not specifically about any particular piece of information, but just the big picture. You know, there's just so much going on, even though in a sense there's not much going on because we're all stuck at home. So on the one hand, we're not busy and there's not much going on, and then the bigger picture, you know, like Trump withdrawing the funding from the World Health Organization, these political moves, and thinking about what the future might be like, and hearing news about what the economy might be like in the future and what we might do about that. Lots in the air, isn't there? You know, in every sense of the phrase, in the air, you know, in the ether, in the information, and as possibilities for the future. So let me know what you're thinking about that. We do have an ongoing conversation in the Happy Homesteaders Facebook group, because my money's on that for the future, is in being a bit more self-reliant and getting off-grid in every sense of that phrase as well. And I've got a few things to share with you. Let's go, of course, as we normally do, to the numbers, and which is a horrific way of depersonalizing the whole phenomenon at the moment. But yeah, these are the statistics that are charting the progress, if you like, and I use that term loosely, of the coronavirus. This is global, not Portugal alone. We'll go to Portugal in just a minute. But look, over 2 million coronavirus cases around the world, according to Worldometer. And pick your sources of information as you will. I'll go with the ones that feel to me like the best to go with until I get better information or better sources. And very interesting to see the sort of ads that are coming up. More alcohol and face masks over on the right-hand side of the screen. There were bras on there the other day for some reason. I don't know. I can honestly say to you, I do not research bras, and that's not coming from my browsing history, as it were. 126,000 deaths recorded around the world, 126,811. And I do sympathise slightly with Priti Patel and Donald Trump when they're struggling to read out big numbers. The biggest numbers, I read the biggest numbers. Yeah, sometimes I'm no mathematician, and I'm not particularly good with numbers. But yeah, there you see there the tragic figure so far of deaths due to coronavirus, 126,811. But the really nice green figure there of tested recoveries, goodness knows how many people have got coronavirus, they would have known, but not been tested and have recovered. So I was going to say you have to take these figures with a pinch of salt. It's the best we've got, isn't it? It just as a guide to what's going on. But I'm always heartened by that anyway, to see that the recovery number is going up, and it far outweighs the death toll at the moment. So let's go. And you can see, look, on the graph here, again, I say this with no pretensions of being a mathematician or a scientist or anything like that, just a pundit offering a service and a place to have a conversation about this. Really, that's how I see my part in this. And it is hockey stick business with the world graphs at the moment. And it's all important, of course, where you are, in the country that you're in, and the locality that you're in. So we can see the headline figures for Portugal. Total cases 17,448. With deaths in Portugal currently of 567. And if we go and drill down further into Portugal, we'll see the numbers there. 347 tested recoveries, and that little bit of flattening out on the graph there. We are going to go to George Branco's coverage, which, again, you know, talking about the best sources. George, I really like the way George is handling this. But you can see from Worldometer's graph there, I don't know the difference between a linear and logarithmic graph. If you've had time on your hands and you've discovered the difference between a linear and logarithmic graph, let me know what the difference is. But it's flattening out, isn't it? Whichever one you look at, there is, you know, it's not going straight up. There seems to be, it's turning east, to mix my metaphors. And you can see the spike is coming down, the spike of daily new cases. So the spike pattern, I should say. Flattened curve there of active cases as well in Portugal, and yeah, the deaths not flattening out particularly, but that again might be because of the way. Yeah, look, that's a nicer graph. That's a better graph for your emotions, let's say. Total coronavirus deaths in Portugal, logarithmic, are flattening out there. So let's just stop sharing that for a moment, come back, see who's around this morning. And I'm really interested to know what you've realized as we begin to be more conversational in tone here this morning. What have you been your dawning realizations about yourself and your life and the future and the society and the world that we've got? To give you an example, I heard George Osborne and Alistair Darling being interviewed on a British radio show last night, talking about how they were the chancellors of the Exchequer coming out of the crash of 2008 and onwards, and how that was managed. And in a sort of jokey aside, George Osborne said, I think, or it was mentioned by the presenter, that they had only just finished paying off the debt of World War II in George Osborne's tenure. And George Osborne, I don't know if this was a joke or not, he said, and I think we've only just finished off paying for the South Sea bubble, which I believe was in the 1800s. Now, they were laughing about that. But and the realization I had with that, and we're going to go and look at what our president here in Portugal has to say to the banks in just a moment, because it's really interesting. It was an article I missed from the 4th of April, but I still think it's worthy of inclusion. But the tax-paying beast, which is us, isn't it, really? It's like we're going to get helped out, bailed out, possibly, and then it's all going to be paid back by tax, isn't it? It's not like the government is actually doing anything benevolent or charitable particularly. It's just their particular management of the debt and taxation beast. And it just really irked me to hear these two ex-chancellors laughing about how long it takes to pay. Who's paying and who did the money come from? That's my big realization. I mean, I've had thoughts along those lines before, but it just really struck me last night that these, the money's made up. Let's face it. It's just, if you go to get a bank loan, they put noughts on your balance there, and then you have to work hard to pay it off. The money's being lent by somebody. The tax is being paid by us. How does that work? And could we think of a better system? That's my realization to share with you. Anyway, Debbie says, I was an ex-politician from UK one day. When I'm fluent in Portuguese, I'll understand the way Portugal ticks within its establishment. Yeah, that's I say that I've got a cultural political age of about a 5-year-old in Portugal, which works really well for me most of the time, because I don't know what the hell's going on. And I don't know what people's beef is, the Portuguese people, and how they really view the Prime Minister and the President. It certainly seems to be a little bit more respectful. I'm sure there's dissent and disagreement, but it's not quite as vicious or negative as it would appear to be from where I'm from in the UK. Good morning to you, Barbara. Lovely to hear from you, and Debbie's good morning greeting as well. Yes, good morning. Before we get into the politics, Nikki, good morning from the UK. Great to hear from you, Nikki Thornton. I don't know what your dawning realization is. Good morning, Carl and all. Stephanie, extending a greeting to all of us listening here. I'm confused, says Hannah, how we ever go back to using hotels or restaurants before they find a vaccine. Surely hotels are finished. Yeah, I mean, hotels were in a tricky situation already, weren't they? With the challenge of how people want to stay when they're traveling in terms of Airbnbs. But I live in a little town in Portugal that is built on hotel trade. And I really don't know what's going to happen. These big hotels, they really are big hotels. It's like the one out The Shining, the Korea Palace Hotel. I just think that's going to have to be turned into offices or flats or something like that, or a different kind of experience. Anyway, can't use communal space or clean rooms quickly for the future, says Hannah. Yeah, great question. Interesting realization. And these are the things, aren't they, that we're sat at home thinking, hold on a minute, hotels, how's that going to work? Hold on a minute, football, how's that going to work? Some of us aren't thinking that. Some of us really are. And just these sudden things that come to you when you're sat there contemplating your lockdown navel. Anyway, bon dia, Carl from Linda Austin. Good morning, Linda. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope they have the capacity to perhaps do takeaway services and contactless payments. Not always feasible, but may get some facilities functioning again. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of distancing, isn't it? The intimate experiences that we were familiar with, that part of our culture is built on, certainly in Portugal, restaurants, tightly packed. That's going to be rethought, isn't it? Very interesting. So yes, Nikki, I wonder. I think contactless money's filthy old stuff, isn't it? And I think it is some people's agenda to get rid of the dirty money, not dirty in the whole and general sense, but the stuff you touch, and just go to contactless. generally speaking. It's a wet one, says Steve. Good morning, Carl. Steve and Claire, from Steve and Claire. It's a wet one. I imagine he is referring to the weather. And how is Tinder going to operate? I mean, yeah, I think that was triggered by using the word intimacy. Our intimate futures are in question as well. People must be thinking, how's dating going to work? I don't know what. Oh yeah, I was listening to a guy called Charles Eisenstein on Rebel Wisdom last night. Very interesting fellow, Charles Eisenstein, a bit of a commentator about the future and about the world situation. He was talking. Oh dear, I've just seen my wife's comment in there. Hey, how about a cup of tea and some toast? Anyway, she's saying, I see you're ready for showtime in your shirt, jumper, and long johns. Have a great show. Thank you very much. Charles Eisenstein was talking about sex robots. I mean, oh dear, let's not even go there. And now I've said sex robots, that will probably come up in the advertising on the right-hand side of some of the websites I look at, because, these things are always listening to you, aren't they? Miss the affection from Portuguese people. Absolutely, Debbie. This is a very intimate, affectionate society we live in, and it must be breaking the kind of national heart and psyche in some ways to keep the distance as we are. And Barbara, it gives me a vote of approval for the new background with my giant wellies in the background and the Barcelo cockerel hidden by the microphone here, but he's still there. Thank you very much, Barbara, for that. So let's have a look at what the president said to the banks. I think this is fascinating. And whether or not, I mean, maybe the Portuguese among us who know the culture will tell us if this is a bit of posturing and a bit of sort of political toing and froing. And, kind of, he would say that, wouldn't he, from his privileged position? But look, Marcelo says, payback time. Marcelo tells banks it's time to repay the people who bailed you out. President Marcelo is calling on the country's banks to start repaying the millions of taxpayers who bailed them out in recent years. He told reporters the banks owe the country, he said. We all know the reasons why. As companies are crying out for support in the context of the current pandemic and hundreds of thousands of families are in layoff with bills mounting, Marcelo says it's time to agilize, facilitate and help. This is the opportunity to repay what every Portuguese contributed to the sector in recent years, said the head of state, referring to the 25 billion in bailouts and recapitalizations that have been paid for by the nation's taxpayers since 2007. I don't think this is going to be two-way traffic, quite frankly, but let's see. The banks have got feet of lead, it would appear, certainly in the UK when it comes to helping people out. We're in a marathon. I like this. A banking source told Espresso, our efforts will be crucial from the 500-meter mark. Athletic analogy there. The situation now is to absorb the impact with the least losses possible so that later we can think of economic recovery. My experience of banks is that they are, I was going to say cold-hearted, just seriously businesslike and rational, I think. And they're not going to kind of reverse bailout the public, are they, without the support of the government? And then what is the support of the government? That is the people paying tax. So how is that going to work? I just think that's a one-way valve of the help to the banks. It's not. I can't see it coming back towards the people. And sorry, I'm not being negative. I just don't think that it works in that way. And the EU, yes, very good. Will the EU help Portugal by giving them money because of the virus? I don't know what the plans are. Things have gone very quiet in Brussels, haven't they? I mean, every country's got its own challenges now, and these collective attempts seem to be breaking down. That's the thing with Donald Trump, isn't it? Just in a fit of pique and anger, saying basically to the WHO, it didn't work. You failed. We're not giving you any more money. And as the purse string holder, it would appear, and he was challenged for saying he could make whatever decisions he wanted as the president. Seems to have made this one. It's being widely reported this morning that he's just cutting funding to the World Health Organization. So we will see. And on a more positive and practical note, great info on the hugel culture the other day. I like the idea a lot, says Gary Austin. Thank you, Gary, for bringing us back down to earth, literally, with your taking us away from politics momentarily there. Although what is more political than getting in your garden and growing your own food? I can't think of a more political act than that, personally. And you've started on the hugel culture project already. If you're not sure what Gary's talking about, And if you saw a picture of it, you might believe it was a burial mound, and the pressure had got to somebody and put their beloved in the garden, because it's just this sort of heaped mound in the garden on which you grow things. That's hugel culture, and we were talking about that in the group, which I have there, the Happy Homesteaders group on Facebook. But thank you, Gary, very much for bringing hugel culture up. And Debbie, the banks in England are giving mortgage relief and overdrafts. Yeah, but that just kicks it down. I mean, sorry, I'm not meaning to argue with you, Debbie. I just think it's interesting how people do see that as some kind of benefit or blessing. An overdraft, of course, will have to be paid back. It's not like a jubilee or a writing off of debt, is it? And people saying, look, we're all in this together. That would be a real sign, wouldn't it, that we're all in this together, is that we level debt or we do universal basic income. Not like, okay, we've looked at the situation, we're going to give you a loan that you're going to pay back for decades. That doesn't sound to me like help. That's just relief, isn't it, in the short term? And good morning to you, Rod. Rod Skeet is tuned in as well. I'm sure we'll have something to say about how the economy works or is not working. Good morning to you, Rod, there in the Tamar-ish area of Portugal. Great to hear. Yeah, if you're shouting out, just do let us know which part of Portugal you're from and what the weather's like. You know, a lot of us are British and obsessed by the weather. I certainly am. I'd love to hear it's looking pretty grim here today, sadly. But let me know how it's looking in your part of Portugal. Going to go now to George Branco's coverage, which, as I shared with you yesterday, I think is really good. And he's an Australian journalist, I found out, who's come back to Portugal to revisit his roots. He gives, on this newsletter, Coronavirus in Portugal for Estrangeiros, he produces this newsletter with some sort of, hard facts and some light relief as well. He told us about how the Portuguese National Ballet was streaming their shows free of charge yesterday, which was a really good find. A great lockdown. This is coming into our consciousness, isn't it? Our collective consciousness, the great lockdown. And that's what it's being referred to as, to cut GDP by 8%. And PM says restrictions shouldn't be eased before May. So is that another of your realizations? That's another question we're asking this morning. What are your realizations? What are the things that are dawning on you in this new state of affairs that we're in? Like, oh my God, this isn't going to be over for some time yet. Certainly not before the end of May, says the PM. We seem to be in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment, says George. For the fourth day in a row, we have numbers between 300 to 600 new confirmed cases and another 30 to 35 deaths. Hopefully those numbers start to fall soon. For some global context, he recommends the Johns Hopkins tracking tool. I have that as well, and it does have some, for those people who do like to look at the numbers, there are some excellent appendices to that to show you the patterns around the world, and obviously they focus a lot on America as well. But that tracking tool from Johns Hopkins shows Portugal with the 16th highest number of confirmed cases in the world, just below Russia and Brazil, two countries that until recently had fewer cases than Portugal, but are suffering much worse daily increases. And there you are. They're the figures that I gave you earlier on. The percentage increase is just over 3% on confirmed cases, and nearly 6% increased percentage on deaths there, sadly, here in Portugal. And I'll just give you a little bit of this information, courtesy of George Branco, about the PM saying restrictions shouldn't be eased before May. Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa has shared some thoughts on future changes to state of emergency restrictions, saying they shouldn't be eased before May at the earliest. In an interview with Observador, he doesn't give many details beyond saying any eventual changes will have to be gradual and progressive and may vary from region to region. That's interesting, isn't it? How we might be in regional differences about how we open back up and return to what might be called normality, though I doubt we're ever going to go back completely to what we knew. And the longer that goes on, the truer that is, I believe. Those variations would depend on the severity of the outbreak and the age of the population in any particular region. That's going to be hard to call, isn't it? It's much easier to make a blanket decision, I think, than to make regional ones, because then people start arguing in the regions, don't they? That's not fair, and so on. The PM says containment measures of some sort must stay in place until there's a vaccine, and that they will be tougher for those at more risk from the virus, such as old people. It's not the time to give the wrong signal and ease measures, Diario de Noticias quotes him as saying. In the same Observador article, he strikes a more positive note on the subject of summer holidays. He believes it will be possible to enjoy them, but warns people not to book anything yet, and suggests staying inside Portugal to avoid the risk of border closures and flight cancellations. So talk about giving with one hand and taking away with the other. But what else can he do? And here we go. Look, great lockdown to hit Portugal worse than Euro debt crisis. The IMF has predicted Portugal GDP will fall 8% on the back of the pandemic. This is a Publico report. That's almost twice as bad as 2012, the year the debt austerity measures hit hardest. You can read this for yourself. I'm not going to go too deeply into that. I don't want to depress you at the start of the day. My job here, I think, is just to give you the facts, and we talk about them a little bit. And we also come up with some practical solutions, as Gary was talking about there. And look, it's snowing where I am. Isn't that a funny effect? Let's talk about it and let's figure out the practical steps we can take to alleviate these problems and meet them in some way. And there you go. I've just adjusted my green screen. God, do everything around here. Yes, a few more hellos. Thank you very much. Yes, Debbie says it's more than they've done before. This is referring to the banks giving mortgage relief and overdrafts. Yes, fair play. Linda, Austin is in Alvázora, where it's raining and cold. So same for you up there or down there from me anyway. Bon dia. Huge rain was marvellous for our gardens last night. We've seen the pictures, Lilu, of your fabulous allotment. Really nice what you've done there with your raised beds. And hopefully the aubergines are happy in their new place, the little aubergine seedlings here. So bon dia to you. And yes, if you were putting your plants in yesterday, this weather is perfect, isn't it? Stephanie, good morning to you. Storms here in Tavira last night were spectacular. Yes, a lot of parts of Portugal are on yellow alert, aren't they? It seems a great dilemma. Is the ability to keep people employed, but at the same time, do we need so much consumption of materials, goods, cosmetics, fake nails and lashes? Let me go on record as saying I will be giving those up as my efforts to help and ease the situation. No more fake nails and lashes for me. We can contemplate ways to create jobs that do not center around mindless purchasing to make I could just see the top of my bald head with your message there, Stephanie. To make our insecure selves feel better. Loving this little bit of psychological analysis of what's going to happen and what could happen. How did we get to the point of retail therapy? Just some things to consider. That is a great question and a really good point you make there of our mindless consumption and buying things to make ourselves feel better and all that cheap stuff coming in from China mainly. I mean, if it wasn't the Chinese, it'd be somewhere else, and it always was, wasn't it? It was Hong Kong when I was a kid. Of course, Bangladesh, the sweatshops of the world, basically. And we gladly buy that stuff up just to save a few bob. Those people who make it, their lives aren't that awesome, if the reports are to be believed, and I do believe them, whilst we enjoy a little bit of retail therapy, as Stephanie puts it there. We do need something else, don't we? The economy was a sick patient with underlying health conditions. And a lot of what I can see, the stimulation, the economic stimulation is like, resuscitation, almost like the bankers and the politicians jumping on the chest of a very sick patient and pumping, cash into its arm like adrenaline to see if we can get it up and running again. We've got to, for me, I think we need to do something different. I think it might. We've gone on quite I've gone on quite a long time this morning. Hopefully that's useful in terms of the facts and figures and the beginnings of conversation among us here about how we face the future. Do really thank you for joining us this morning, Stephanie, Lilu, Linda, Debbie, Rod, Gary, Barbara, Hannah, Steve, and Mrs. Munson telling you all that I'm just sat here in my long johns. And to Nikki, yes, to all of you who've joined us this morning, thank you very much. And we'll be back again tomorrow. But let's talk more about those dawning or sudden realization, those bolts from the blue about, oh my God, this is going to be like this in the future. Or, whoa, that was really weird how we used to do that. Why did we put up with that? In this time that we've got to reflect and think and pause in this, was it called the Great Lockdown? Yeah, I think it's the Great Pause. And great again in every sense of the word. It could be great in it could be magnificent. It's certainly great in scale. Let us see. Final comment coming in. The last word to Rod. Yes, the last word. Just a quick greeting from Dawn. Yes, a morning from Jerry and Dawn. Been raining here all night and early morning. Thank you for that weather report from the Algarve there, from Dawn. And finally from Rod. I think there could be a surprise for Portugal when this is all over. People visited Portugal because it was viewed as a safe place to holiday. I think this might be extended to be a safe place to live. due to the way the virus has been handled. The problem with this, well, not problem, but if there's an increase in people moving here or just visiting, how will the government vet visitors to stem the continued spread of the virus? A great thought to leave us with. Thank you for that, Rod. Wise as ever there. The extension of the idea that Portugal is a safe place, not only to holiday, but as a place to live as well. And a lot of countries will be judged. Their national character will be judged by their response. And so far, so good with Portugal. Thanks for that, Rod. Thank you to everybody. Talog. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care and bye for now.